Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday and welcome to the 2019 Harmony Webinar Series. My name is Christy Weeks and I am the Digital Media Manager for Harmony Foundation. Today's presentation, The Impact of Technology on Mental Health and Recovery, is presented by Robin Kleisler with Resolution Peak Counseling in Longmont, Colorado. For those of you who are new to Harmony Foundation, I'm trying to switch slides. There we go. We are nestled on a 43-acre campus in the Rocky Mountains just outside of Estes Park, Colorado. Our Colorado Residential Rehab offers comprehensive treatment for adults and their family members. Who is Harmony Foundation? Our why factor is we believe that long-term recovery from alcohol and other drugs is possible. And how we do that is as a place between two worlds, our location in the Rockies provides a safe and quiet respite from the pain of addiction. With 50 years of treating addiction, we have fostered a generation of long-term recovery who supports our clients and families for a lifetime. Harmony staff at all levels of the organization work together to create a community of recovery support that is long-lasting. Who are we? We are a 70-bed residential treatment program, again, located near the Rocky Mountain National Park. We offer an evidence-based 12-step program that is gender responsive. To learn more about Harmony Foundation, we invite you to visit us at www.harmonyfoundationinc.com or contact our admissions staff at 866-686-7867. Just want to touch base with you about a couple of housekeeping items to be aware of. At the end of this webinar, we will be sending out an evaluation. We would appreciate it if you completed the evaluation. We used it to gain a little insight on the presentation and for ideas for possible presentations for the next months. You must be actively engaged in the presentation for at least 45 minutes in order to receive a certificate. We use a system that tracks how long people are engaged in the program, so anything less than 45 minutes would not qualify for a certificate through NADAC. However, we can provide an attendance certificate if for some reason you need to jump off early. You will also be receiving your certificate by Friday, end of day. And if you do not, you can reach out to me at cweeks@harmonyfoundationinc.com. With my email up on the screen right now, you can also reach out to me if you are interested in receiving the slide deck from the presenter. She was more than happy to share it with us. And also we record all of our webinars, so if you are interested in an audio version, the recording, you may request that from me as well, and I'll be happy to share that with you. So we want to take a minute to thank Resolution Peak Counseling for taking the time to talk to us today. If you want to learn more about them, you can go to their website, www.resolutionpeakcounseling.com. And I'm going to take a few minutes here and introduce our presenter, Robin Kleisler. She is a licensed professional counselor and licensed addiction counselor who has spent the past 14 years in wilderness, school-based, and inpatient and outpatient treatment settings. She has a personal passion for working with individuals and families affected by addiction and trauma, and regularly presents at national conferences and in her community. Robin owns and operates her private practice, Resolution Peak Counseling, in Longmont, Colorado. So real quick, I just want to mention we will be answering questions at the end of the presentation, so feel free to use your chat box on the right-hand side of your screen to type them in, and I'll keep an eye on them, and we will answer them at the end. So at this time, I would like to turn this over to Robin. Let me get this to you, Robin.
All right.
I lost all my tools here. I am looking for, there we go.
Show my screen. There we go. All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Gina. Hopefully you guys all can hear me. I am so excited to be presenting on the impact of technology and mental health and recovery. Um, like Gina said, I have a background in outdoor industry. Sorry, there we go. An early career in outdoor guiding industry, and being outdoors with people really got me interested in counseling, because when you're outside for weeks on end with people, they tend to talk a lot about what's going on with them, and it really propelled me into wanting to become a counselor. And so I got my master's degree in transpersonal and counseling psychology, specializing in wilderness therapy, and have been working in the field of addiction for the past 14 years through wilderness therapy programs and community mental health, inpatient and outpatient programs, intensive outpatient programs, and currently I'm in private practice in Longmont, Colorado, specializing in addiction and trauma through EMDR. And I'm also very passionate about supporting family members as well as clients through the process of addiction and recovery based on my own personal experiences of loving and losing someone to addiction. And I enjoy helping others explore their use of technology and make some needed changes to be in line with their treatment goals as well. So when I refer to technology, I'm going to be talking about anything from personal and work email accounts to texting, video gaming, social media, dating sites, gambling, pornography, video streaming, internet surfing, Googling, news apps, and stock market trading, and whatever else that anyone can possibly do on the internet. And we're going to start by looking at how different generations were impacted by technology. So I'm going to define the generations, starting with the baby boomers, because we don't really need to go back too much further. But baby boomers were born between 1946 and 1964. So the youngest today are 55 and the oldest are 73. Then we have Generation X, born 1965 to 1979. So these folks are anywhere from 40 to 54 years old. Then we have the Xennials. So you guys probably haven't heard much about the Xennials, but it's a crossover microgeneration. And I'll explain a little bit more why they've singled out this generation. But that's anyone born 1975 to 1985, who are anywhere from 34 years old to 44 years old. And then we have the millennials, Generation Y or Gen Next, born 1980 to 94, youngest being 25 and all the way up to 39. And you'll notice between Gen X and millennials, there's a lot of crossover. As we go through characteristics of each, you guys can probably place yourselves, if you have anyone in those generations, in what feels most appropriate. And then the younger generations are the iGen, born 95 to 2012, youngest being 7 years old and oldest today being 24. And then our new generation is called Gen Alpha, and births start in 2013 and they will go all the way up to 2025. So the youngest today being 1 and the oldest today being only 6. We're going to start with the baby boomers. I've taken the liberty of putting up favorite TV shows of the generation, so that's Bewitched. And baby boomers grew up with just radio, television, and landlines. And they tend to use technology to assist them in getting the information they need and increasing convenience, and not as much for connection as the younger generations. They were well into their mid-adulthood when mobile technology and social media kind of became popular. So those 60 and older now spend more than half of their daily leisure time, which is around 4 hours and 16 minutes in front of screens, mostly watching TV or videos. And if you turn your attention to the graph, leisure time looks a lot different today than it did just 10 years ago. So there's been a change in daily time from 2005 to 2015 for people 60 and older. Screen time has increased by 27 minutes and exercise by 2, which is great. Other leisure things and socializing and reading have decreased over the years. And this is important, as we'll talk later, because 1 in 6 boomers live alone, and they're being nicknamed the loneliest generation because they're having fewer kids or no kids, and their generation has higher rates of divorce than previous generations. So a lot of folks are on their own. Technology in Generation X. We all loved Friends. So these are folks around 40 to 54, and they grew up in the rise of the personal computer and email accounts and chat rooms. There were the first video game consoles like Nintendo with Mario Brothers and Zelda, and then Sega with Sonic the Hedgehog. And we had some car phones and beepers, and cell phones were introduced well into adulthood. And they're coined the digital immigrants because they adapted to new technologies in adulthood. And they tend to be more savvy at technology than baby boomers, but they weren't shaped by it as they were growing up. And then the Xennials, so I'm a member of this generation, age 34 to 44. That's My So-Called Life, if you guys remember that show. And we're a micro-generation with Gen X cynicism, but also millennial optimism and drive, and also, able to utilize technology in a more intuitive way. We experienced an analog childhood, but a digital adulthood. And people aged 35 to 49, this is a surprising fact, use social media 40 minutes more each week than millennials, and we're more likely than millennials to pull out their phones at the dinner table. Now, millennials always get the bad rap, but this crossover generation ends up using social media a lot more. And the theory around that is that we have more of a need for communication. It peaks at midlife. A lot of people have dependent children and aging parents, and a lot of us are also at the height of our careers or managers, or have a lot of need to be in touch with work. And then we have the millennials, age 25 to 39, roughly. And they're dubbed digital natives because they grew up at the height of social media platforms. They're hyper-connected and very socially oriented, and they have higher rates of anxiety and depression than previous generations, and they're also more likely to seek out help for those issues. And they grew up during the rise of online dating, Match.com, Tinder, Grindr, Bumble, all of those things, which has really changed the way people view dating. The youngest millennials were in adolescence when the iPhone came out in 2007. And then we have Gen Z, dubbed the iGen, ages 7 to 24. I had a very hard time figuring out what shows were most popular because streaming's been around. So I put YouTube and Netflix, and then reality TV has really peaked for this generation. So that's what I chose. And they were children when the iPhone was introduced in 2007 and grew up with mobile technology as just a fact. A Common Sense Media study showed that 8 to 12-year-olds spend an average of 6 hours per day on screens, and teens spend an average of 9 hours. Of course, a lot of kids now starting in elementary school up through high school have a lot of time online at school as well. And I work with a lot of adolescents and middle schoolers, and they tell me, like, despite the restrictions on their iPads at school, everyone can get around those and still be able to access social media and gaming. They tend to communicate primarily through social media texting rather than face-to-face or phone interactions. I made the mistake of telling one of my adolescent clients yesterday, like, oh, well, you should just call a friend when you're feeling like that. And they just started laughing at me and said, Robin, like, we don't call people, we text them. And they're used to instant gratification for information, and they're also used to instant connection. And they tend to spend less time with friends than any other generation. So they're in touch with their friends more often, but they're spending less face-to-face time. And we're going to talk about that in regards to mental health in just a moment. And in 2017, teen suicide hit an all-time high. Depression, anxiety, and loneliness have also increased since 2012, with happiness declining. And then our youngest generation, Gen Alpha, ages 1 through 6. Their new nickname, I just learned this as I was updating these slides, they're calling them the glass generation for their very early use of screens. It is amazing how intuitive technological products are for very young kids. I have a 5 and 6-year-old, and it's amazing how easy they can figure out how to use these applications when they wrestle some things away from us. Some kids are actually born with a social media account. You see children influencers and parents kind of securing different handles for their kids in social media. And they're used to interacting with artificial intelligence like Siri and Alexa. The predictions on Gen Alpha traits are pretty speculative at this point. Some people worry that their worlds will so smoothly integrate into the physical and digital that they'll be prone to more impatience when things don't satisfy needs quickly. I think those of us that have young kids around or are working with young kids or parenting young kids can see this pretty easily. Educators also notice, differences in attention span and needing to entertain more when they're teaching. So 10 trends shaping the newest generations, and really all of us. Our adolescent mindset has been lasting longer for the younger generations than previous generations. So the boomers, a lot of them are pretty much expected to be self-sufficient by the time they left high school. And that's changed, a lot of different factors in there in parenting and, just how the world works. But that's definitely what we're seeing, especially those of us that work with adolescents. I have clients that are terrified to get their driver's license or have really big issues in going off to college and really struggling making that transition. The instant gratification that we all get from technology, the kind of just being able to Google anything at our fingertips, I think that can transition to other areas of our lives too, of kind of losing some patience. And the lack of face-to-face interaction. Most people will opt for text and messaging rather than calling. I've noticed that a lot with my clients. People can text my business line and we'll have a lot more people wanting to ask questions, and it can be really convenient in one way. And of course, when you're working in mental health, sometimes you really want people to call you. Or I'll have people text me in crisis and I will attempt to call and they won't answer, and I will have to communicate via text, which is not my preference when I'm working with someone in crisis. Insecurity, so rise in mental health issues across the generations. We'll talk about that in more detail later, but we see that across all generations of depression and anxiety rising. People are more likely to identify as spiritual than religious and less likely to go to church, which just impacts how people engage with their communities. And we tend to be more insulated, so safety focused, but not intrinsic. So there's been a decline in civic involvement. I was just talking with a client yesterday about how sometimes on social media we'll see like posts that like really speak to us, and so you might want to share those posts, and then it feels like you've kind of done something, but it really doesn't do a lot because either people are just going to agree with you or they're going to disagree, and you're going to get stuck in one of those terrifying Facebook conversations, or it's not really productive. But there's been a decline in people kind of actively taking part in communities by going to city council meetings or getting involved in causes, because sometimes there's that feeling like we've done something by just moving information. And there's a lot of income insecurity with newer generations, starting with the millennials who experienced the recession and a lot of people coming out with 4-year degrees and then not being able to get jobs. And there's also new attitudes and expectations around work and being able to be flexible and work-life balance. Indefinite, there are a lot of new attitudes towards sex, relationship, and children, with people having a lot more casual dating relationships because technology makes that a lot easier to meet people. And people putting off long-term relationships or putting off children later in life, which also has to do with income insecurity. And inclusivity has improved, because of technology. People can understand different cultures, different opinions, get more information that they wouldn't have been able to get before, and equality and free speech are valued. And people are more likely to identify as independent in their political views. Some of the mental health trends that we're seeing is increase in loneliness. This is across the board. This particular study was looking at adolescents, the percentage of 8th, 10th, and 12th graders who agree or mostly agree with this statement: I often feel left out of things, or a lot of times I feel lonely. And you'll see that, loneliness, I think, is something that everyone experiences in adolescence. We all have a fear of rejection. But there's a lot of data that supports that when the iPhone came out and people had mobile technology as well as more social media, that feelings of loneliness actually increased, of people feeling left out and lonely. And that's because of that fear of missing out. When you're on screens and you're looking at social media, you're seeing a lot of what's happening that you may not be included in, and that's going to lead to more loneliness and comparison, or feeling like everyone else's lives are amazing and yours sucks. And yeah, and the decline in face-to-face interaction is actually what I worry most about when it comes to how technology is impacting all generations. Like we talked about, higher rates of loneliness, and teens and young adults are spending less time at parties or going to movies than any previous generation. Face-to-face interaction is so important for our brains, and it's better than connecting through texting and social media. When we're texting and communicating online, it might be fun and make us feel good, but we're not getting the same chemistry as when we're sitting face-to-face, looking at someone's expressions, hearing their tone of voice. We actually get huge rushes of oxytocin when we experience that. Oxytocin is the cuddle hormone. It's the hormone that, parents experience when they have a new baby, that helps mothers, bring their milk in and be able to care for that baby. It's what we feel like when we're really feeling in connection with somebody, and it directly combats cortisol levels in our brain, which helps deal with stress. And so oxytocin is really important, and we're not getting that through communicating online. And the reason this is a problem is because our brains have kind of evolved to crave face-to-face interaction. We're very, very attuned to social acceptance and extremely attuned to rejection. And the reason is that back in the day, if you were rejected by your tribe, you died. Humans don't have a lot of natural defense things. If we're being chased by a predator, our strength lies in our numbers and our prefrontal cortex and our ability to create ways to protect ourselves, ways to feed ourselves. And so that's why we're so attuned to rejection, because we really can't survive on our own. Neuroscientists have discovered that the emotions of being left out activate the brain region involving physical pain. Why, when you are talking with your clients, about feeling lonely or left out, it's like a physical reaction that we have. My heart is broken. Like, you can feel it when you're being left out. And texting and social media, unfortunately, are fertile grounds for negative emotions. Seeing comparisons, seeing in real time what's happening that you're not there for, or being able to, if you're already feeling kind of bad, and you get online and you're looking at your friends' pictures of their vacation in Hawaii, it's really easy to be like, why don't I ever get to do anything fun? And it just reinforces whatever negative emotions we came on that site with, especially when it comes to body image and all of those things. One really interesting phenomena that I'm noticing with a lot of adolescents is they get very stressed out by their phones. It's really challenging because people expect instant responses. And so a lot of my teenagers will say, like, I was playing a soccer game, or I didn't have my phone, or my phone died. And when I got back to it, I had all these messages of my friends being like, hey, what's up? Why aren't you answering me? Are you mad at me? What's going on? And just this escalating, like, if you don't respond right away, it's also sending a message to people. And so a lot of my adolescent clients will say it's like really stressful because they feel like they have to, in order to keep their relationships intact, respond to friends, automatically when they reach out to them. And people are very sensitive about posts getting liked or not liked by other people. I feel like it's more prevalent in the younger generation who kind of grew up with social media. It's interesting, I just saw an article about Instagram is considering, or maybe already has, hid likes. So instead of having it be public with how many times your photo is liked on Instagram, they're considering hiding that so that maybe the user can see who's posted or who's liked their picture and how many likes they have, but it's not public, so it doesn't become a competition, which I think is a great idea. So the social comparison, like I said, on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, there's a huge effect on mental health with that, not just for being left out, but also for feeding into whatever uncomfortable negative emotions you're already having. The less face-to-face time to practice social interaction skills leads to increased social anxiety. I have so many clients, adults as well, that just really struggle being in social situations or even making phone appointments. A lot of times I will literally sit in my session and help people make phone appointments because, when you're texting and you're used to being able to email or text folks, like you get to choose what you want to say and you don't have to be spontaneous. And when you're making phone calls or you're talking to someone face to face or you're interviewing for a job, there's a lot more pressure to be spontaneous, and people are losing some of those natural skills because it's so easy to communicate via text message or email or whatever platform that people are messaging on. Tons of communication misunderstandings. I remember when I had a job a while back, I had tons of emails I was getting and I have very little time to respond. So I would put really short messages like, yep, I'll do that. And then people would give me feedback of like, oh, were you mad at me when you did that? And I'd be like, no, I was just really busy. And so I started putting smiley faces, like in the olden days, like the colon and then the parentheses, half parentheses. And that just solved everything. And that's why emojis were created, because people were constantly misunderstanding the tone and what people were saying and what mood they were in. And so that's why emojis were created. Although I find it very hard to understand a lot of emojis these days as well. We've all heard about cyberbullying, and there's been a lot of press on that, and I think it's definitely, there's always been bullying going back in time. Adolescents are always going to put others down to feel better or want to join a group. That's not new. What's more challenging for children growing up these days is that, when I got teased for my funny last name growing up in the hallway, it was embarrassing that other people witnessed it. But, my mom and dad and aunt and uncle and my friends from camp and people I knew across the country weren't aware of that. Whereas when things are posted online and there's bullying online, it affects your entire world and everybody in it. And so I really feel for kids these days because that's a common form of bullying people, is through social media and online stuff. Severe lack of sleep, and that's across generations. We have so many ways to entertain ourselves, and when we have it on a mobile devices, we all get sucked into watching that another episode of things just bleeding into each other on Netflix or YouTube. And it easily, our want for entertainment sometimes takes over, our need for sleep. And so a lot of generations are experiencing severe lack of sleep, especially teenagers who really need a lot of sleep. They're actually recommended to get 9 hours of sleep. But in a 2015 study, 57% more teens were sleep deprived, 7 hours or less, than in 1991. And any parent can tell you who has teenagers the struggle, of getting kids away from their devices so that they can get enough sleep. And then, of course, we have rising rates of suicide and depression. So one national screening study found a 50% increase in clinical level depression among 12 to 17-year-olds in just 4 years, from 2011 to 2015. A CDC study in 2016 revealed that between 2000 and 2016, the suicide rate rose by 30% across the US. And the suicide rate for persons 10 to 19-year-olds declined by 15% between 1999 and 2007, and then increased by 56% between 2007 and 2016. Again, just a reminder, the iPhone came out in 2007 and allowed all these internet platforms to be taken mobilely with people and increased their use a lot. And teens who spend more than 3 hours a day on electronic devices, which is honestly most teens, are 35% more likely to have depression and at least one suicidal risk factor. So what are screens doing to our brains? We all know that, I think across the generations, we struggle with reduced attention due to the constant interruptions and distractions that we have. Even when we're attempting to do, work online, it's really easy to toggle over and check our Facebook or social media or check the news, it's harder to sustain attention. And we're also losing a lot of time for self-reflection and thinking deeply. I remember car rides, when I was a kid and we didn't have any mobile devices, and it was boring and you were on a road trip with your parents. You just stare out the window and you think of things and develop games and that kind of thing. And that's not something that most adolescents and children have anymore, because we have lots of different ways to distract ourselves. The average teen checks their phone 80 times per day. That was back in 2017. And this especially impacts children and adolescents with brains that are still developing. So the adolescent brain really doesn't fully develop until age 25. And so we all know kids have always struggled to set priorities and resist impulses. And technology just adds an extra layer of challenge in helping kids, develop and sustain attention. And the dopamine pleasure reward system is activated when we're on the internet. So I'm assuming you guys are all very familiar with the dopamine pleasure reward system. It's what drives addictive behaviors. It was kind of evolved because we needed to do things like eat and have sex in order for our species and as an individual for survival. And so we get a rush of dopamine after those things, and that motivates us to do it more. And we get the same thing when we see a new notification online, or we're looking at, what's happened on Facebook. We get a little rush of dopamine when that happens, even if it's not like super exciting. And so it kind of motivates that continued use and checking, because we get that dopamine. That's a really feel-good kind of rush. Also, our minds are attracted to what's new and different rather than what's actually important. So I don't know about you guys, but I'll check the news sometimes and find that I am just, go on to read one article I'm interested in, and then there's a million other articles under that. Or you get sucked into the comments, and then like 2 hours later, you're like, wait a minute, I was just gonna check that one article, and I got ended up going down the rabbit hole because it's new and different. We like that. And it can lead to overuse with signs and symptoms of addiction because of that dopamine rush that we get. And, potentially prime our brain for future substance use. So drugs and alcohol are instant mood changers. Technology also can be an instant mood changer. And it also allows us to distract away from uncomfortable emotions. So how can we support our clients dealing with technology overuse? So I like to look at the criteria for substance use disorders in relation to technology use disorders, since we don't have an official DSM diagnosis, but it really kind of goes along the same line of what we're looking for when we're assessing substance use. First one is using longer than intended. And like I said, we can all get sucked into that one more episode, that one more article, or we'll get on to research one thing and then all of a sudden we're stuck doing work emails. Using longer than intended. Trying and failing to cut back use. So a lot of times, and I'll talk about this in interventions, but I have clients look at the apps on their phones and the ones that are just kind of sucking up their time, and I'll encourage them, take it off your phone. Like, you can still access it on a computer, but if you don't have it around you while you're waiting in line at the supermarket, you're less likely to do it. And I have a lot of clients that take it off and then they put it back on, and then they take it off again and they put it back on. That's kind of trying and failing to cut back on use. I see this a lot with video game addiction, of trying to get away from video games. Unfortunately, video games make it really challenging because they're so involved with the MMORPGs, which is multimedia online role-playing games. You're so invested in that game, it takes a lot of time, and you have this profile and you have these friends online, and it's really difficult to delete your profile. They make it really hard. You can maybe like deactivate it, kind of like on Facebook as well. You can deactivate it, but all those things are there when you sign back in or when you pay again. So it's really challenging sometimes to get yourself away from those. Spending a lot of time using and sacrificing sleep and healthy eating due to your use. I feel like we can all relate to that. Cravings and urges to use when not using. That's like you get off your phone and you're like, I'm gonna have some tech-free time, and then you're like, I wonder what's going on with this, or I wonder if anything's new on the news. And it's that fear of missing out on things that are going Not managing to do what you should at work, home, or school because of your use. So finding that it's taking up so much time that you're letting other things slide. Continuing to use even when it causes problems in relationships. So you're getting a lot of negative feedback from different relationships, and you know that, being on your phone while your spouse is trying to talk to you is probably annoying them, but you just do it anyway. Giving up important social, occupational, or recreational activities due to use. So you are doing less of the things that you used to. You're choosing to stay home and hang out and look at a video instead of going out with your friends. Riskier behavior online. So accessing sites that could have potential consequences, texting and driving, putting yourself in danger. We see all the time things on the news about selfie accidents, people trying to get really cool shots to put on Instagram or Snapchat and ending up getting in an accident or falling off a cliff. Or I saw one yesterday about a girl who was doing extreme yoga on a balcony and fell like 80 feet, although she survived. But yeah, a lot of accidents and kind of risky behavior. And continuing to use even when you know you have a physical or psychological problem that's made worse by your use. So knowing that when you're depressed, you aren't going to feel better after going on social media, or continuing to do things like aren't really helpful for your therapeutic goals. And then needing more use to get the effect you want. So maybe playing video games for an hour used to kind of satisfy it, but now it needs to be a little bit longer. And the development of withdrawal symptoms, when you're not doing or not on any platform, which can be relieved by re-engaging. And a lot of those withdrawal symptoms look like irritability, anxiety. Like, I know I'm a little bit more prone to snappiness if someone's interrupting, me trying to send a text message to a friend. And now we get to the fun part where we actually get to talk about therapeutic interventions. And I'm going to talk about individuals, families, and couples. So the first thing we have to do when we're screening for this stuff is actually ask the questions, like how much, what do you do online, or how do you spend your time in front of a screen, and look at the quality of that time spent online and ask people if, they want to make any changes. I love doing social media, kind of Facebook, or it was really fun when MySpace was there. I used to do some really fun MySpace kind of makeovers, I'd call them, especially when I was doing wilderness therapy. And when we were at base camp, being able to get online and change the music and the backgrounds and like really help people make sure they're putting off what they want to present about themselves. But looking at social media and asking clients, what posts make you feel really good and which makes you feel really bad, or who do you compare yourself to, or if you're seeing posts that upset you. Like I have, family members that post, oh, look at this abused animal and you should all do something about this. And that's just like not what I want to use for social media. I will hide a lot of people like that. I don't like, getting my news online. And so I tend to hide, block, or unfollow sites that are posting news because I get my source for news in other ways when I'm prepared for it. And so I encourage clients to unfollow, unfriend, or block unhealthy profiles that negatively affect them, and increasing their viewing of positive content. So like for my folks in recovery, there's some great Facebook and Instagram sites from recovery sources and people in recovery who are putting their lives out there of how they're doing what they're doing, and really amazing groups like Phoenix Multisport, that's a recovery community, an active outdoors recovery community for people. Making sure that they're seeing positive stuff, and unfriending the ex that makes them feel bad. Helping clients re-engage in physical activities and interests and passions offline. So doing things that they used to do, but they've kind of gotten away from due to life or due to other things that they're doing online. And building emotional regulation and distress tolerance skills, because I feel like we're all kind of losing those things because we have so much entertainment. So teaching people how to give voice to their emotions instead of distracting away from them. And coping skills to tolerate negative, uncomfortable emotions, and skills to move negative core beliefs to more positive or at least neutral ones. And then social skills, reducing anxiety around face-to-face interactions. I do a lot of role playing about conversations that are bringing up anxiety. I've helped clients call, the admissions line, at their university to ask about any support they can have for tutoring. Those are things that can bring up anxiety, and make sure you're asking about like how people feel about these things, because we do have a generation that has had less time to develop those face-to-face skills and might need a little bit more support. And then, of course, encouraging any tech-free time to build solitude. And being a wilderness therapist, like really encouraging time spent outside is huge. I give lots of homework to do fun things like go walk around a lake once this week, or like find a spot around your house that you can just go to and like check in with yourself on how you're doing. That's so important in this day and age of distractions. Family interventions. I have a lot of families coming to me, a lot of parents being like, my kid plays too much video games. So the first thing I do with families, instead of singling out one member, I have each member share what they value about the things that they do on screens and what they struggle with around their own use of technology. You'd be surprised how many kids will tell you, like, I know I play too many video games, but I just can't stop. Or I know I'm on my phone too much and that it's bad for me, but I just can't not do that. And I think it's important for parents to kind of hear what kids' self-assessment is. And then also for kids to be able to share how their parents' technology use affects them. Because a lot of kids will say, like, my mom's always distracted, or my dad's always, online doing stuff, or my parents work at home a lot and it gets in the way of wanting to connect with them. So I teach a lot of I feel statements and having each member give feedback about what they observe around other members' screen time use and behaviors. Encouraging the family to create a technology contract to promote healthy, safe, and moderate use of screens. So really having everyone talk about, their feelings about things and talking about what are appropriate boundaries, and really involving kids and parents on that, making sure everyone's got boundaries, especially around bedtimes. Really encourage family members to protect their bedtimes for everybody. And encouraging postponing of smartphones for children as long as possible. I think it helps to utilize the village. So if you have kids, or if your clients have kids, encourage them to talk with their family friends or their kids' friends' parents, and see if you can form some norms of your own. If you have young kids and you aren't already dealing with the struggle, talking about when's a good time to allow our kids to have cell phones and communicate with each other. Like, when are you allowing your kid to join social media platforms? I was on the playground the other day before school started with my kids, and I saw there was a bunch of kids that were going into second grade playing, and they had a cell phone, and they were taking pictures, embarrassing pictures of each other, and saying, I'm going to post this on Snapchat to the whole entire third grade. And I was just like, oh my God, this starts so early. And so use your village. I don't think there's, a perfect time to introduce iPhones to children, but if you can establish some norms, then you might avoid some of the fights around like so-and-so already has a phone. And the pediatric guidelines for children's media use are, kids under 18 months avoiding screen-based media except for video chatting with family and friends. 18 months to 24 months, parents should choose high-quality programming and watch with their children. Children 2 to 5, limiting screen time to 1 hour per day of high-quality programming. And for children 6 and up, establish consistent limits on time spent using media and the types of media. So that's pretty vague. And I think it really depends on the kid. I know parents, I have clients with kids that really don't do a lot of social media and some of the stereotypical stuff that I'm talking about in this presentation. And they're totally into sports or swimming or doing other things, and then some kids get really sucked into it just based on their personality type. So I think these contracts and these boundaries need to be very unique to each family member. Couples interventions. Helping couples give voice to emotions behind their own tech use and the use of their partners. Help them set tech-free times to reconnect face-to-face, and explore how technology impacts jealousy, sex life, and quality time. It is always an issue when I see couples, even if that's not why they're coming to me, technology use usually comes up somehow. especially when it comes to jealousy or, people going to bed at different times. People just aren't having as much sex lately because of the availability of distractions and how easy it is to pursue entertainment on our own devices, not together. I always discourage emotional conversation via text. It doesn't work out well. I mean, there's definitely sometimes when writing things are helpful, but it needs to be followed up by face-to-face conversations. So I really discourage emotional conversations via text message, unless there's some, discussion around how that's going to look. And teaching interpersonal effectiveness skills through I feel statements. There's, great resources through DBT and CBT on these things. And my favorite thing that I'm going to teach you guys today is a values exercise. I do this with families and individuals and couples. And it's all about looking at, does your tech use align with your values? I have clients write down their top 3 sites that they spend their time on. So, work email or personal email, social media, texting, gaming, video streaming, whatever. And then I have them look at a values list, similar to the one on the left, and asking like, what are your top 3 values in life right now? And then I have them look at both of those and see, like, does the time that you're spending in front of screens align with one of your values? If your value is career and achievement, then, being on email might help you feel like you're fulfilling that. But if your value is adventure and you're not doing anything online that's really helping you connect with adventure, then you're going to be out of alignment. And it's really my philosophy that when our actions and the things that we're spending our time on are out of alignment with the things we actually value, that's when we see more mental health issues coming up, and that's when we see more addictions. So what changes can you make in the way that you access technology to be more in line with your values? Because technology should help us make connections to the things that we value. I'm going to show you guys this really awesome commercial for a granola bar. Because I think it's really awesome. I stole it from another presentation at a wilderness therapy symposium, and it's on YouTube, but I'm gonna let you guys look at this and then we'll go to questions and answers. Whoops, where'd that go?
When you were a kid, what did you do for fun?
So we go blueberry picking, for instance. Just that's so cute. But it was true.
We grew watermelons, plantains.
I found an old sign which was big enough for me to sit on. It made a great toboggan. It was very slick, very fast.
I had a few fish in my basket, and I looked up on this bluff, and here's this black bear sitting there watching me. If he starts chasing me, I'm going to keep throwing the fish out of my basket until he's gorged and he won't bother me. And what did you like to do for fun? You go door to door, get a group of kids, and you play lots of games, hide and seek, just going out to the field and playing baseball.
And we built these massive forts, the kind that you can actually sit in and play in, with our friends. And it was just really wonderful.
So what do you like to do for fun?
Video games, definitely.
I like to go on my phone,
Text, some email.
My favorite thing to do in the world is definitely watching videos and playing video games. Those take up so much of my time.
3 hours or 3 to 4 hours a day. Same.
5 hours straight.
Just last week, I watched 23 episodes of a TV series in less than 4 days.
I forget. I'm in a house. I have parents. I have a sister. I have a dog. I just think I'm in the video game. I completely get lost. I would die if I don't have my tablet.
Whenever I feel upset, I'd play video games and I'd feel normal. It's really wonderful.
When your daughters grow up, your great-great-grandkids, what do you think will happen if this trend continues?
It's scary to think that they'll never have to leave the house.
Cindy grew up doing a lot of the things that I did and enjoyed, and I see what my grandsons are doing today, and it's mind-boggling.
By the time they have kids, it's going to be a really different environment.
I actually feel a little sad because I feel like he's missing out on what's out there in the beautiful world.
that special connection with nature, I think it's innate in all children, but needs to be nurtured.
So, I love that commercial, such a tearjerker. So here's a lot of the resources I used and some things that you can look up for yourself. I've done a lot of things really focusing on the iGen and the younger generations. And so here's a lot of that information that I got. And if you have a question about any of the research studies I cited, feel free to give me a call, or I'm happy to get a copy of this. And I'm happy to open it up now for any questions with the time that we have remaining. So,
wow, what a great message, Robin. Thank you so much. I'm going to give everybody kind of a minute to type in any questions they may have. And while you're doing that, I'll kind of roll over some of the information I covered earlier. As I mentioned before, we do record all of our webinars. So if you're interested in the slide deck or the audio recording, please reach out to me. I did put my email in the chat box. It's cweeks@harmonyfoundationinc.com. And if you're interested in our next webinar, please keep an eye out for the details. They should be out in the next few weeks. We'd love to have you join us. Again, when you receive your survey today, please be sure to include your suggestions or topic ideas that you think might be of interest. So questions, Stephanie did mention nature deficit disorder. I think your commercial alluded to that, yes?
Yeah, I love that book. Actually, I think it's called Nature Deficit Disorder. No, Last Child in the Woods. I actually have it in my office. That's an amazing book for anyone looking at impacts on the younger generation, especially when it comes to the absence of outdoor experiences. So I'm very, very passionate as well of getting people outside and making sure they have access to that.
Right
so I'm glad that was brought up. Yeah.
Wow. I am not seeing any other questions at this very moment, but Robin, gosh, we thank you so much for such a great webinar. I think it's something that all of us see on some level. I know I do with my 3 children. So to know that there's such great resources out there is definitely very helpful for me. We thank you for taking the time to share with us all this information. And on behalf of Harmony Foundation, to everyone, oh, hold on, I got a question. I was getting ready to wrap it up, but I got a question. Let's see. I want to stop using social media myself, but I notice everyone around me on their phones. Any recommendations?
Yes, I think everyone struggles with this. I'm a huge advocate for at least going through your social media, and I call it culling. I like to cull, people I'm connected with, because sometimes you'll just get connections that you don't need to be in touch with. My rule is if I wouldn't go out to lunch with somebody, I probably don't need to be friends with them on Facebook. Like if I was in their town, I wouldn't go out, wouldn't call them up, or if I don't even have their phone number, I probably don't need to see, what their kids are doing or anything like that. I think it's hard. I struggle with that too. As much of an advocate as I am on Facebook. I've avoided the newer ones just because I can only handle so much. But so many things happen. Facebook invites. A lot of my friends use Facebook for birthday invitations. And so it's really hard to pull yourself away. And I think you just have to look at, if it's creating negative effects for you, it might be worth just connecting with people and saying like, hey, I'm not going to be on social media, so text me if you want to invite me to something, so that you're not feeling left out by it. But certainly not having it on your phone. I don't have social media on my phone because I'll just look at it for no reason and I don't get much out of it. And so I try to only have that on my laptop because I'm not really on my laptop a lot. I do my notes and I'm in sessions face to face with people, and I get home and I have, young kids and, maybe I'll check things, but the phone's a lot easier to get sucked into. So that's my first recommendation. If you don't want to get off social media, or just look at the different platforms you're on and try to choose 1 or 2 that you can get off of.
Right. Good recommendations. Rebecca Smith says she has a great grandchild, 7 grands and 4 children.
Wow.
She loves technology, but she also loves forest bathing. Some time frames for tech use.
Time frames for tech use.
Yes.
Wow, that's so unique and individual, and it kind of depends, like I said, on the kid. Personally, for me, and granted, I work with tech overuse and video game addictions a lot, and so I know that for my children who are 5 and 6 years old in kindergarten and preschool right now, we're not going to have video consoles in my house ever. That's going to be something I put a big kibosh on, just because I know my son who loves technology and he's really into STEM stuff and engineering, and I want him to get those skills, but I know he'd get so sucked into it. And so I think it depends, certainly with the younger children, you want to encourage them to develop social skills doing face-to-face stuff. I have my kids in karate. I want my kids to be learning how to connect with kids and to be getting into challenging social situations and practicing and making, mistakes on that. When it comes to teens, I think you really have to involve them in that, because anytime you set a boundary with a teen, they're going to push back, tenfold. And so it is really important to have some buy-in. I will say, I think teens have a lot more insight than we give them credit for around the negative effects of technology. I think you need to give them a little bit more support. So when it comes to use of tech, it really has to be looking at, what are they doing that's benefiting them? Because we can't avoid technology. I'm not an advocate for, not teaching our kids how to moderate it. Like, that's really important. This is going to be even worse, to moderate, moving forward. And so it is important that we give our kids a chance to learn how to moderate, but it is also, because they're kids and they're impulsive, important to make sure that we're giving lots of guidance. And so I just recommend parents be very aware of how your kids are spending time online. Ask them to show you or play that game with them. Make sure if they're seeing negative traits in technology or too much overuse of social media, instead of saying, get off your phone, ask them or tell them, like, hey, I'm noticing that you seem really frustrated, or I'm noticing that you've been really irritable lately. What's going on? Is being online affecting that? Are you having some kind of personal issue? Ask questions about it, because a lot of parents don't know the kind of platforms their kids are on. And it's important to talk about safety and how kids are using that as well, because there's so many, kids are pretty naive, just as a general. It's just the developmental stage they're in. And the younger generations tends to trust people more online. They don't have the cynicism that us older folks have as much. Like, if someone tells them they're, 16-year-old girl online, they might believe it, where it might be, some creepy 50-year-old guy trying to prey on your daughter, So I think it's important to have those conversations. So that probably doesn't exactly answer things, but there definitely should be restrictions. There definitely should be conversations happening, and it's going to look very different. I have friends who are much more open to, more tech use than I am. And my kids are, of course, they have a therapist mom that specializes in tech addiction and is a wilderness therapist, so they don't get a whole lot of technology. We'll do cartoons and movie nights, but we don't let them play on iPads because they just turn into little monsters,
I do know.
And I can only avoid it so long, so I'm exercising that right now. But we are eventually going to have to teach them how to moderate it. It's a scary thing, and it's not
Boundaries.
it's not something we have a guideline for. So I feel for all you parents of teenagers, and grandparents of teenagers. I am dreading those days, because it is going to be challenging, but I think it always has to start with conversations and knowing that we can't just stop it.
Correct.
This is how people communicate now.
So Rebecca Smith also commented, she's read that Steve Jobs did not let his young kids use technology, which
I
is
put that in my presentation.
Good little tidbit of information. Gosh, we are out of time, and I want to respect everybody's schedule today. Robin, again, thank you so much for this presentation. It was so informative. Everybody, thank you for taking the time to join us today. Please let me know if you would like that slide deck or that audio recording, and we hope to see you again next month. Have a great day.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks, Robin.